Dun, dun. Good morning, Morgan. How's
Good
it
morning.
Did you like my theme music? I don't
I
know where it
did.
came from. I think I just made it up.
Well, to all of our, I believe, audio listeners and folks on LinkedIn, there's always usually an Easter egg in the YouTube version of these videos of something Nicholas is singing, something Nick is. I think we've definitely had the Jeopardy theme before. I know he's cracked jokes in the interim. I think there's a very funny Easter egg in one of our earliest live shows where we start laughing uncontrollably about something before it goes live. But anyways, happy Friday, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to the B2B Power Hour. Nick, we've got
Like
a
your late
great...
night DJ voice today.
Oh,
Hello,
yeah.
everyone. Welcome to the B2B Power Hour.
I'm honestly, I know as people are filtering in here, I want you to drop a hello in chat, and then I got a question for the day.
Question of the
But
day. What is the question of the day?
before the question of the day, I do think we should do like B2B after hours at some point and really get our late night DJ voices on close to the microphone, play some lo-fi beats, BYOB, and like, I don't know, in a Zoom room somewhere. That sounds fun to me.
Okay, we can do it.
So if you're a fan of the idea of a B2B after hours, definitely let me know. I would love to hear that. So today, question of the day for everyone who is joining us this morning. As we always do, if you're new around here on these Fridays, is a hot dog a sandwich? I want to see some controversy in the comments. I remember we asked this to a group of like 30 people, and it was like split evenly down the middle, and it got heated. People were
Like this
really
is a drunk conversation.
or more controversially, is a taco a sandwich? Nick, do you have any perspective?
I'm not gonna lie. This has never crossed my mind. I Sometimes you make me wonder, my friend. Sometimes
It's an ongoing internet meme. Have you not seen this? It's like big. Is a hot dog a
No, I've been
sandwich?
sick all week.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's true. It's true. It's
I
not
mean,
like now. For years, this has been a thing.
oh, hot dog is honey.
Hot dog's not a sandwich, according to Alex.
Definitely not a sandwich.
I
Does it matter if you put like onions and other like goodies in there? Is it like the quality of like veggies that make it a sandwich? Or
I don't know. Like, because one of the funniest things to me, I remember I got into a heated argument, and one of my friends was like making this argument that uh obviously part of the reason a hot dog is not a sandwich is that the hot dog bun is connected. And so somebody had pointed out to him that Subway sandwiches are also not cut all the way through. So does that make a Subway sandwich a hot dog? Which is just so funny. See, this is why I love this question. Everybody just starts going off.
now,
Welcome to the
anytime
B2B
and you
Power
guys
Hour.
try to message me or message Morgan, you don't get Morgan, and then you message me and you get me right away. Now you know what Morgan's doing.
Yeah, dealing with hot dog versus
Contemplating
sandwich.
hard questions of life.
Whether a hot dog is a sandwich or not. Now, I will say, Sam, I appreciate your comment that our country is already divided. We don't need to add fuel to the fire. Ain't that the truth? So today, Nicholas, we are talking about one of the most important topics, I think, for modern sales development, because sellers don't just use one channel. Sellers aren't just calling people anymore, at least. And sellers aren't just emailing people. We're also using social, and we're using them all together. So we're going to be talking about how to layer those things together, how to do it well, how to make it work.
It's funny because when we first started, especially when I was door knocking.
Mm-hmm.
And so we only had to master one channel. That was it. And then after a while, that evolved. And it went from that to they taught me the art of cold calling. There wasn't much art. It was a whole lot of scripting. But the world has changed, and a lot of it has to do with privacy laws, access to technology, and like even the information of our buyers. And so we get when we go through this process today, a lot of this is actually looking at why to choose one over the other
Mm,
and things to consider. So, for example, if you send someone an email with your email signature in it, it can get captured by their CRM that will grab your number. And when you go to call them on the same system, it can say, "Hey, I think this is so and so," instead of spam caller. So you went from not even showing up on their phone at all because of the new dialers and different systems, like even Google blocking things, to
mm.
just having an opportunity to have the phone ring at all. So this is the battle that we're having. Isn't that our messaging is bad? Well,
Well,
but it's actually getting through it all. Another thing is like emails. If you're leading with emails and you're running large sequences, most domains, depending on how well it's nurtured and how it's warmed up, can actually only handle between 25 and 50 emails a day.
Mhm.
How many sequencers are burning that out? You run a large sequence. I know Ricky had just posted about this the other day too. You run I always say it wrong, the Ago,
Oh, I know what you're talking about,
Agogi,
but I'm not entirely sure myself.
but you run the sequence and it's 10 emails. Well, 5 emails. Oh my god, the sickness is killing me, man. You're gonna have to go and support me on this. But
Happy to
anyways,
help.
after a few days, I think it's 10 emails. After 5 days of doing that and adding people in, you've already capped it. Now anything over top of that burns your domain. And why this matters is now your deliverability will suffer.
Mhm.
Once again, it's not even about the messaging, it's that you're not getting through because your channel is burned.
And I mean, I ran an experiment this week in preparation for our conversation today and made a post about it yesterday. I think the competitive landscape has sort of shifted or is shifting on LinkedIn right now, because I think ultimately the strength of our tactic, the individual tactic we're using, how we're reaching out to people, whether we're sequencing or automating or all the rest of it, is uh, is basically reliant on the weakest link in the chain in the competitive market. So if you have a lot of spammers, it makes you harder to get through. And that's what I saw.
Mhm.
So I ran this experiment this week of this just, I don't know, classic network builder strategy we had developed on this show 6 months ago, which was a cold outbound connection request to a cold lead, no warm up, no comment, no engagement. And then after they accept a connection request, which I still proudly had very high connection requests, you sent a follow up like, thanks for connecting. How are you? Well, because over the last 6 months, everybody out here has been spamming more and there's more automation sequencers and there's more pitches than ever. That how have you been came across as fake rapport building, as BS. And I got asked blatantly, so when are you going to pitch me? What are you pitching? What are you selling? And I'm like, I'm not, I'm not doing any of that. I'm just trying to connect with you. So it's on every one of these channels, on using social, on using email, on using phone, the competitive landscape has shifted and is shifting in real time as more and more sellers try to use it differently. So every little marginal improvement we get, we also have to fight for. And so today we're going to talk about, yeah, how to leverage them in many ways. I saw Lila's comment about the multi-threaded trifecta, dead on. Um, I will do my best today, full disclaimer, to say layering instead of multi-threading. I have learned for enterprise sellers that particularly that multi-threading is about reaching different personas inside the account and not using different channels necessarily to reach those personas.
I didn't realize you were mixing those two up.
So I'm going to do my best today to talk about layering these together instead of multi-threading them. But in case I mix it up and I say multi-threading at some point, I'm likely talking about using all of these channels together in a full stack. Um, so Nick, where do you want to start?
I think what we'll do is we'll start with whatever channel you're leading with.
Mm.
And
Hmm.
so I'll give you an example. You send an email. People ask me, well, email's my main channel. Why would I need to worry about LinkedIn? So that I want to go and add like this full picture. And I want
Yeah.
to talk about this so that we can air it out. Morgan, if I sent you an email and you didn't know who I was, what would you do? If it was a good email,
If it was a good email,
other than reply.
I would probably look up your LinkedIn profile, honestly.
Yeah. Or even if you
Or
Google my
just Google
name,
search, probably. Like, look at your company page, maybe, if I could, but and I mean your company website, I should clarify. And then probably, because LinkedIn's really good with Google, I would find your LinkedIn profile too.
yeah, unless you're investing a lot into having a presence somewhere else, the thing that pops up first is LinkedIn. If that LinkedIn profile comes across as salesy, promotional, or not valuable, you're done.
Yep.
So this is why when we look at these strategies, we have to look at the full picture. You know, if your email deliverability is not there, well, that's different. Another thing to go and add in too, right? Because you have to look at your channels. But so you're emailing first, but your LinkedIn's not up to snuff. Well, then you can fall off. Okay, now you're cold calling, but you're not getting, nobody's picking up.
Mhm.
Well, maybe try leading with an email because then it gets you in so it doesn't show you as spam. Now, what about LinkedIn, Morgan? Why do you think somebody would use LinkedIn first before calling or emailing? What do you think would be the advantage? And keep in mind, people have quota and they need to work fast.
Mhm.
Why would LinkedIn be a good thing to start with?
I think it puts a face to the name. I mean, it's the it's that feeling when, if we step outside of sales for a moment and you go to an event in your neighborhood and you meet a neighbor that you didn't know you had, which we've all been there. I've been there just a couple weeks ago. You meet them casually, just for a second. Hey, I'm Morgan. Nice to meet you. 2 weeks later, you see them in the grocery store. You're like, that's my neighbor. There's that trust by association or visibility that I think LinkedIn provides, where even if it's just a comment or a couple comments, or even if it's just an engagement um, through a piece of content and not a connection request and this like high pressure DM and this like really crazy high pressure approach some sales leaders take or some sales pros take to LinkedIn. And it's just engaging with their stuff. Now, when that name pops up in their email or they hear it in their voicemail, they're going to say, I've heard that name before. Where have I seen that? And that is powerful because now you're no longer an anonymous seller.
I started using LinkedIn for a funny reason.
Oh, okay.
Canada has crazy privacy laws.
Mm,
And so if you're sending emails to people that they haven't had any prior outreach or you're calling mobile phones, you can be offside really fast. So I originally started to use LinkedIn to go and build a relationship and start like build some rapport and open that door so I could call an email. But right now with things taking so long in a sales process, I'm going to ask you guys, where do you think what do you think people read more? Your nurture sequences or your LinkedIn content? And
I know the
this
answer.
will change depending on your industry.
Hmm.
Certain roles, you need to actually dive into how they're consuming information. Certain roles, like I know certain, I think I can't remember what type of engineering, they prefer email. They love nurture sequences. They love Reddit. And so
Yes.
by showing up there, you can actually get them to read those sequences, but it's also worded differently. The messaging is different. But one of the reasons why I like leading with LinkedIn is you can earn trust at scale and you can pre-sell a pipeline.
Hmm.
But what you do is when you're using any of these, you have to use a different approach. Lean on what you're better at. If you're not as comfortable with LinkedIn, you still should use it. But if you're more comfortable on the phone, lead with the phone, but look at how the other channels stack up to both add credibility and nurture, actually educate the buyer to make them a better buyer. The reality is, most buyers have already bought the suit and they come to you for the tailoring. If we are trying to force them to buy a suit, you'll never get the tailoring. You'll get the bare
Hmm.
minimum. Those are the people that don't actually implement and see real value.
Hmm.
So when we do these, we have to look at the actual experience that we're creating and then put it into a routine, time block it. Where I failed miserably when I started is I did not time block. I didn't realize this was a thing. and I didn't lead with a routine. I know there's a lot of different names for it, like income producing activities or revenue producing activities, but you need to know what works and what doesn't for you specifically. And then
Mhm.
actually have to track your numbers too per channel to know what is working. Like, we talked about it last week. If you're running a sales driven campaign on LinkedIn, if you're getting a less than a 30% connection rate, something is very wrong.
Mhm.
It should be between 50 and 80%.
Mhm.
And then what you want to do is play detective and go and figure out what happened, where it fell apart. If you're cold calling and you're not getting as many people picking up, and you want to go and compare against yourself, this is how campaigns work. Is you want to look against yourself how it compared. So like over the past 3 months, has my connect rates gone up or down?
Mhm.
What did I change? What is it? The time blocks? Is it my opener? What change that drives this piece? Okay,
Mhm.
what can I add in that might go and increase my effectiveness? Is it LinkedIn first? But this is how you want to stack. You don't want to take this cookie cutter. I could tell you what has worked for me, but
Sure.
it depends on yourself and what you naturally feel stronger at. And you need to reverse engineer based on success. What is actually working? And when you see something drop really quick, that's a sign that it's not working. So
Mhm.
Morgan, the other day you saw that our old play
Mhm.
isn't
Doesn't work
playing out the
anymore.
way it used to.
Nope. Which is fine. The world changes. And so what I love you're pointing to, and I think it's important for us to pick apart a couple of these things. One is social, email, and phone are channels. And those channels are used in relation to a strategy. And your strategy is fundamentally about who you're targeting. That's it. Who are
Yep.
you targeting? What do they need? Do VPs pick up their phones? Right. And so I have a little bone to pick for a second because, and this is fine, this is very human of us, but every once in a while I see a comment or I see a post of like, well, my CEO doesn't answer the phone or my VP of sales does answer the phone. That's great. That doesn't mean anything about the rest of your industry. It is on you to figure out what are in your vertical, what your personas actually respond to. Do your VPs pick up their phone? Do they want email nurture sequences? Do they prefer to engage passively on LinkedIn? Now, that sort of research, in all honesty, takes more than 3 hours. And the reason it takes more than 3 hours is you're actually trying to create and construct a mental model about how these people behave in the world. And then all you're doing is matching up your sequencing, these tools we're talking about, social, email, phone, to what they want. That's very much the definition of a buyer led strategy. All we're doing is serving the buyers as they want to be served. The reason it's difficult and the reason we fall short on this is we don't invest enough time actually figuring out what they want. And there's two ways to figure out. One, you could directly ask them, and you can, and I would ask not just one of your personas if you're able to. I would ask many of them to see. But you can also reverse engineer based on the data you have, right? Because already you probably have a lot of data about who picks up the phone and how many meetings you booked off of those phone calls. You also probably have a lot of data about the sequences that you send out, what your open rates are, what your reply rates are, how many meetings you booked off of that. So you have all of this data at your disposal. Now you're just reverse engineering it to figure out for the people that I want to sell to, what do they respond the most to? And I saw, I believe it's Angenique. I apologize if I mispronounce anybody's name. The utilization of LinkedIn in relation to sales is starting to make more sense now. Agreed, because now we can start to see, okay, in my industry, who's active at these accounts out on LinkedIn? And Nick, you actually have a really interesting, I want to continue to focus on this targeting thing for just a second. One of the things we hear a lot is, well, what if my persona isn't active on LinkedIn? And it's like, look, we can't help you then. First of all, in direct outreach to these, they're not active. They're not going to pick up the phone, right? It's just LinkedIn. They're just not going to pick up the phone. But there are other ways to get into an account that isn't just the direct stakeholder. And maybe those people are active on LinkedIn.
I'll tell
And
you, we're
yeah,
right now
Nick.
in one of the best communities to go and get referrals,
Yes.
sellers and marketers, and customer success.
Yep.
We understand customer. That's where we play. And we want to make our jobs better. We understand that. So it makes for an easy conversation. Sellers are a great place to go and start with. But another thing you can do is go look at what they're reading. Do they get, if they're still getting industry publications online or paper? Uh, I know back in the day we used to go and look at like what country clubs they went to, if they did, what communities they were part of, were they part of the Chamber of Commerce? Where do they get their information? How are they staying up to date on their industry? Who do they trust? Who are they bouncing ideas off of to go and make big decisions?
Or even more importantly, nowadays, that uh, there's some marketing. So, for example, you're selling to marketing ops, okay, mops, um, at larger companies. Some of them are active on LinkedIn, but actually, a good chunk of marketing ops folks are too busy in their day to day work to like invest a lot of time in engaging in content. Like, yeah, there's some people out here, but it's kind of niche. It's more ops than it is marketing. But there's communities for marketing operation professionals. There's Slack communities. There's digital hangout spaces. There's Zoom calls. There's events people go to. There's all of these ways to reach them that are related to LinkedIn or are a channel that you can leverage in the social world, right? It's not just LinkedIn. Maybe they hang out on Twitter. Maybe you're targeting VCs. Twitter's a great place to go after VCs. Like again, it's figuring out who are my buyers and where do they hang out? And sometimes the exact persona you're trying to get to doesn't have a front door. Sometimes they have gatekeepers, and that's a whole other conversation for another day. But sometimes they're just not active on the platform. That's okay. Now you get to ask, okay, how do I get into this account? and that and Nick knows this better than I do, but that is an art form, and it requires creativity and an investment in figuring out, okay, if I can't reach this exact persona I'm going after, who does that persona listen to inside the company? Or and both up and down in case they're not all the way at the top, who on their team who's impacted by the pain that we solve, what are their jobs to be done, can we reach them directly, can we leverage LinkedIn to do that, can we set up an email sequence for that? There's lots and lots of different ways to target the accounts and reach them without necessarily just sending a connection request on LinkedIn and praying and hoping that you know they're going to respond.
So what you guys want to do when you're kind of starting this whole process is you have activity metrics. So let's just say you're going to make 100 connection requests on LinkedIn. Use this for every single one and then use that to compare and then stack your outbound. So activities. So connection requests. LinkedIn, you get 100 a week. So you
Mhm.
get 100. How many of those are accepted? Same as like your pickup rate on a cold call, right?
Or a
How many
reply
are
rate on an
accepted,
email.
right? Then
Mhm.
you go to how many conversations do you have? And then how many meetings? Ultimately, you'll go, the bottom number then will be sales. So everything we do is reverse engineered to know our numbers. When you do this, you'll find something amazing. You have a superpower. The one thing I wish people did more is share this. One thing I loved about being in the bullpen back in the day is that you could talk to the people around the bullpen and figure out where their numbers were. And you could see where you were stronger and either mentor or learn from them and listen, or you could lean in on where you were stronger and put less time in where you were not as strong. So like share your numbers amongst the group, share them in the comments, go and share them with us and we'll go and put it out there so the world knows what good numbers are on these different pieces, because that is where how you find your superpower. That's how you find where you lead with outbound. Now, Morgan brought up something, he kind of jumped the gun, but that's okay.
Yeah.
And it's warming up.
Mhm.
Warming up accounts is another superpower. And, before it was something like we were talking about, it's like joining the Chamber of Commerce, joining an executive gym, and just showing up, being seen, them recognizing your face, going to a local bar, seeing them recognizing your face. Now we have digital communities that anybody can access. It's not even hidden behind a paywall anymore. Where are they? The thing you really have to consider is, where are they the most active? Where do they pay the most attention? And which is the most niche? And I say the most niche because there's so many communities that are too big to be recognized.
Mm.
And you have to go out of your way for them to recognize you. So find the one that's the smallest that gives you the best bang for your buck to show up and network and rub shoulders with the right people. This isn't something new. This is something we've been doing for a long time. But now with digital communities, this is the warm up effect. Sarah Brazier did this amazingly with LinkedIn,
Mm.
that when she cold called, it wasn't cold, it was warm. They knew who she was and why she was calling, which led to extraordinary results. And so you got to really think of where these communities are where you can warm up accounts and even identify accounts you didn't even know exist. So, like for on LinkedIn, Twitter, or any of the social platforms, you can do something called social listening, where you can actually listen to hear what their problems are, what their interests are, and really dive in and peel the onion to figure out what those pieces are to develop your messaging, find the right persona, and figure out what the right time is to actually contact them. And so a little research goes a long way. But once again, it goes back to your numbers, because your numbers will show where you have that unfair advantage. And if you keep peeling that onion back, you'll get a little bit better, 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 better. And warming up accounts will give you like a 2 or 3 times multiple. It's definitely worth it.
Well, and I think, yeah, sorry to jump the gun, but it's such a good topic and it's so important. One of the maybe competitive advantages of social selling compared to other channels is you can take it as slow as you want. I mean, ultimately, yeah, if you have an email sequencer and it's a marketing based email sequencer instead of something you're doing as direct outreach and it's like, here, learn more about our thing. They put in they're an MQL basically. Like, yeah, I kind of that's warming up the account. But it's a little different on LinkedIn because now it's not just your company's name, it's you. It's your name and your face with your tagline and your profile and your content and your engagement. And when you're warming up an account out on LinkedIn, what that looks like can vary, but it ultimately is slower than you think it is. And the reason I say that is it's really important in my book not to jump the gun too quickly. And my little experiment this week showed how resistant people are. For those who didn't see the post, it was like uh, 70 connection requests, I think, and really high acceptance rates. And a quick follow on, thank you for connecting. How have you been? Or some sort of casual opener, passive, very passive opener, not a direct ask. Every connection request was blank. They were all second degree connections in a specific vertical. And I got some serious walls out of that one. Like people were very resistant to having a conversation because apparently they were expecting a pitch. And maybe that was reflective of my own profile. And that was also reflective of the way the passive question was asked and what they had experienced elsewhere on the platform. The thing we all forget is, and I don't mean to be rude about this, but we aren't all that special in terms of our outreach. Like it is very unusual to find a very, very, very different, unique way of doing
Stu
outreach on
Henke.
LinkedIn. Right. Like Stu is a special case. But
Yeah.
most of us rely on DMs, most of us rely on comments, most of us rely on content. So when we DM somebody, they're not thinking about our DM. They're thinking about our DM in relation to every other DM they've ever received and the consequences of interacting with it. So the reason that a passive opener like that doesn't work anymore is a lot of salespeople went out and did that and then immediately pitch slapped somebody and they said, nah, I don't need this. So the warming up an account is slower than you think it is because you are trying to build trust
Uh,
and at
and it's
scale,
also bigger. And it's also a lot bigger than you think it is, too.
100%.
We
Because
underestimate how long it takes, and we
Mhm.
underestimate just how much we're like the impact that we're getting from it.
Well, and I was thinking of so for example, an SDR, a friend of the show, Jacob, has the current record for booking a meeting off of a comment at 17 minutes, I think. He
That was
commented on
17 minutes of commenting to
Of
get a
commenting.
meeting.
Yes. Uh-huh. To get a meeting, which is insane, by the way. That's not that's sort of like top tier rates here. That's not necessarily normal. But one thing that Jacob has said, and one thing we've seen working with him, is that the people he's reaching, because he's engaging in public, is he's earning a lot of conversations in private out of that he didn't
Famous
do
quote.
any direct outreach about. And the reason that works is, and the reason social is different than email or phone, is because email is one to one, and phone is also one to one. But social can be one to one, while it is also one to many. And that, in as I say often on here, that's leverage. So you put in a little bit of effort here and you get a lot of results over here. And that's because your comment on an influencer's post, your comment on a target account's post isn't just viewed by the target account. It's viewed by everybody else who looks at the comments and everybody else who comments. And also a lot of people who like, because when you click the like button on LinkedIn, the comments automatically pop up. So there's so many passive engagers who will see your stuff, where you can warm up an account indirectly simply by showing up on the platform every day and engaging with the communities that they participate in, that they listen to, that they watch. And that's why, to tie these threads together, when you start with good targeting, you know who you're going after, you build insight into what they need, how they want to be communicated to. And then let's say you have that subset that really does pay attention on social or uses LinkedIn a lot. Now you can reverse engineer your activity metrics, your metrics back from what do you need to hit quota, whatever that looks like for your position. Sometimes quota, this week I learned somebody's measured on quota by demos, and other people are measured quota on meetings, and other people are measured quota on actual revenue. And reverse engineering that quota back to, what do I need to do every day to produce that? And then just go and do that.
Got a whole week of learning while I've been sick.
I know. Watch out, man.
I want to go and draw a line in the sand.
hmm
This is not outbound.
Mm-hmm.
So this is why I say you have to be very logical and strategic in how you're layering this. So the warm up is like like I said, going to a gym and earning trust by being likable or credible. And those are two different activities, to be likable and credible. So think of different places where they get to know who you are and find the people that you like to work with, or they like who you are as a person. Then also credible. Where can you share information, even if it's from CS or someone else that you're sharing, like, this is where customers see value, this is where implementation goes wrong, being that informational source that's packaged in a way that people want to consume it. Those are two different ways, but that you could go before outreach, because you can do that less than 15 minutes a day and target thousands of people to go and open doors to outreach. And this is where intent data and different triggers really act that why now? Why should I reach out now? Hey, they looked at my profile 5 times. Maybe I should reach out to them and see if there's something they want to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe now's the time.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they're looking for something.
Mm-hmm.
But this is where we give ourselves air cover. And if we have a good marketing team, we can work with them to provide that very strategic air cover, put our own unique point of view on it, because we're real people in the field doing real work. So go throw that on there. You got your air cover. Now you're likable and credible. How do you think that's going to juice your numbers? But seriously, if you're emailing, calling, or leading with social, how will that change your outreach? Now you lean into your outreach. How are you going to leverage that air cover to go and do better outreach that's more timely and purposeful? And this is how it all pulls together in modern selling, so that it's not just purely a volume game. Yes, you have to do enough volume to go and get the numbers and hit quota. It's also why it's good to go and manage different triggers and have different targets. But this is how we wrap it all together. But it's important to track your numbers. If you track your numbers and you know the minimum, then you know that minimum you need to put in to get the average results to hit your quota. And hopefully you're building your reverse engineering on at least 50% above quota, because then it gives you some fail safe.
Yeah.
But this is how it works all together. Timing and targeting are huge in outbound. But when we're warming up, we're doing a lot of this outreach, or we're doing a lot of this research and strategy by diving into our personas and really understanding, getting into their heads of what are the problems with pain that make them act? What do they need to get a promotion? What's in it for them? Why do people go and buy our solution? What are the main problems that they are dealing with that they would love if we reached out? What are those signs and symptoms that that problem is becoming bigger or that it's becoming more frequent? Okay, maybe now's the time. What are some other triggers? They just got a promotion. They just did a fundraising round. You have to know those triggers, stack those up, but all those triggers are different messaging. They might also be a different persona. But this is why if you run your outbound like a campaign and track your numbers separately, you win. And it all starts with knowing your superpower and how to lean in for you as an individual. And then you build out all the other pieces. And it's like very specific A/B test experimentation that you can't lose. You might fail a test or two. God knows I have. Hey, we've
Same.
had a,
Oh
we've
my
had a couple
gosh.
bombs,
Yeah.
and when we talk about stuff on here, like what not to do, like I've been in LinkedIn jail
hmm
more than a few times.
hmm
When we talk about you can only send 100 connection requests a week, that is a very firm number. I will tell
Very
you,
firm.
very firm. But you have to test this, and by testing this, this is how you win. Now, we need to wrap into something else, and that's multi-threading, not layering.
Before we go there, I just want to,
Oh,
not layering. I want to provide sort of a gut check to what Nick just said. So the thing that usually happens is we get equipped with certain lists of titles, right, or certain industries or certain kinds of companies that we want to go after. That's pretty normal as a part of our ramp process. Like, hey, we sell to these kinds of firms. Here are the people we talk to, et cetera, et cetera. What Nick is saying is a little layer above that, and the gut check that I've always used when you have your timing and your triggers down is, would I pay money to have a meeting with this person?
mm, good
Now,
gut check.
you are not going to achieve that day one of doing this. This is a learning process, right? Because and you're constantly learning. We are both constantly learning because the more you do outbound, the more you're maybe warming up accounts. Maybe the thing you learn in your industry is if you warm up an account for 60 days over social and then you send them an email, their time in pipeline is like that. And you have a
Nothing.
really, really high meetings booked percentage. Whoa, crazy. You definitely didn't know that day one. And also, now you can start to invest and then replicate in that. And now you can get more confident in this gut check of, would I pay money to have a meeting with this person? And that is indicative of a confidence you have based on your insight of the industry, based on your mental model of the persona that you're talking to, and based on your experience that you have doing outreach and making mistakes. I mean, again, like I've done email experiments. They did not go well. We've done connection request experiments. They
They
also did not go
bombed.
well. And this is true. Obviously, we do a lot of stuff on social, but this is also true in cold email. This is also true when you're cold calling. It's totally fine to have a call that doesn't go well. What's important is that you're learning. You're
You're
saying, okay,
breaking it down to understand what happened.
was it the wrong person to talk to? Was it the wrong timing? Was it, and sometimes, and this is the difficult thing, and I want to, this is a hard nut to swallow. You don't always know. You just don't always know, and that's okay too. Like, you want to get close to an answer, you want to have a good guess, but if you can't nail specifically, oh, it was the wrong time, that's fine. Start, keep on trying more. Look for some patterns. Continue to
Oh,
try and experiment, right?
one of my favorite things that somebody told me to do, and I've actually seen it come back up on LinkedIn recently, is when I used to bomb calls, I used to call them back within a week and just say,
Ooh.
or send them an email. It's like, I absolutely dropped the ball. And I've been racking my brain trying to figure out where the disconnect was. Could I please get your feedback so that I don't ever do that again? Because back when I was doing this, we didn't have case studies on the website. I couldn't
Mhm.
go on review all the case studies, put them in a sheet, see who they talked to, use that messaging that they had, the direct quotes that they have to reverse engineer who to talk to. I didn't have that cheat sheet. They didn't know who I was supposed to be talking to, so I was figuring that out as I went. But these people, a lot of the time, they're like, "Hey, I actually don't have control over this. nor do I understand it. It's not something I use. And it allowed me to get better with each outreach.
Mhm.
And this is why, like, track your numbers, figure out who that persona is, really dial it in. Because then think of what superpower you have after a year. Think of your superpowers. If you're an SDR now, think of your superpower when you move into an AE role because you know the logical sequence of the problems that are going through their heads. You'll get to this point, and please comment if you're here because it is a beautiful thing when you start talking and it's like they feel like you're reading their mind. You're like, I
Ah.
literally was just in a meeting about this, talking about it because you've stepped in their shoes. You've talked to enough people. They don't get to talk to their peers as much as you do.
Mm-mm.
And you start to see these patterns. The cool part is when you've done it enough, like a grand chess master, you've seen enough options to know what it looks like before it happens. And this is why really great SDRs, they people wonder what they're doing, like it's like a superpower. But it's because they're doing things behind the scenes you don't get to see, and you never saw that pattern build up. Them really honing in those numbers to figure out what is that unfair advantage. So they don't need to make 150 calls. They don't have to send 1,000 emails. They've got it so dialed in that their prospecting works. And so this is that whole piece of like timing. You know,
Mhm.
I think it was somebody asked a really good question. Oh, it was Lila. Lila asked a really great question. Would you suggest reaching out on all channels the first day if you're engaging with them? If there's a trigger, yes,
Sure.
because triggers have expiry dates.
Mhm.
If I break my leg and I'm in a cast, it's going to be on top of my mind for the next 90 days. After I get my cast off, it's going to be on my mind for the next 90 days. Every day after that, it starts to slip off my mind because there's more important things that are coming up. So, absolutely, if you have a real reason to reach out, that you have a trigger, not just they got a promotion and not just they raise money because you've been told that's what they need. If you really understand the signs and symptoms and the triggers and can provide that insight and that value, like Morgan said, that gut check to go and they would actually pay for that meeting, call them on everything, blast them.
Well, but that's because, like Jordan Crawford always says, you're helping them avoid a ditch.
Yeah.
Like, which is the best analogy I've heard in a long time,
Or a
because
head on
basically,
collision.
or a head-on collision, because basically you're saying, I know based on the 13 other accounts I've worked with that when you do this, when you raise a series B and you don't solve X problem, you are going to hit into the ditch or you're going to have a head-on collision. Is it worth talking to me about avoiding that head-on collision, basically? Right now, that the languaging, of course, can always be massaged, but the central message is I'm helping you avoid this ditch based on this trigger. It's like every time in direct to consumer, every time I've moved, and I moved a lot, unfortunately, in the last few years, I've always gotten mailers, direct mail, for furniture ads from sites like Wayfair or whatever else. Why? Right? Think about that trigger. Oh, they're moving. They're moving into a new space. Maybe they'll need some more furniture. So I'm going to reach out. That's like the base level here of some of the targeting we're talking about. Because we're in B2B and we have access to more information than just an address and somebody changed their address, we can uh, illuminate more of the triggers. We can add in more context building and we can help them in the right time. But it always takes time to figure out those triggers. So it's just this nice little feedback loop that continues to go. Oh, what are you laughing
I
at?
honestly thought you were going to move to Italy.
Oh,
I was for a
I mean,
while there. I thought you were never coming back.
me too. For the record, I definitely didn't think I was going to come back. Wasim has a.
Wasim brought
Mhm.
up a really great point. Most SDRs, I think, go with mentality of more no's, get closer to a yes. Back in the day, that was the mentality. The more doors I knock on, the closer I am to a yes. The difference now is we have access to so much information and it's in our hands. We just have to go and use it. We have to go and use it for something that makes sense. And so it's no longer just about no. Because if your messaging is hitting no too often, it needs to be tweaked. This is why you have to track your numbers. Maybe it's the wrong channel. Maybe it's the wrong person, but you have to ask, okay, where's the disconnect? Maybe I have the wrong problem statement. Shoot. Okay, let's call users, understand where the workflow problem is coming from. Okay, now what is the business case? If I'm One thing I hear all the time listening to calls is when people go and call a VP and they're like, "Hey, this, your sellers are doing this and this and this," and the VP is like, "I don't care.
Yeah.
Top line, bottom line, risk."
Mhm.
They're not judged on day-to-day activities. They are judged on top level strategy. So if you made those calls and you're like, "I'm gonna, no, 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 I'm gonna get closer to a yes," unless that person just moved into that role and you just hit like you're trying to scale luck and you hit the lottery because day to day was still on their mind, you're probably always going to get a no.
Mhm.
But you'll never know that unless you track your numbers and you keep moving forward, getting smarter with each outreach, with each prospect. Track your numbers, track your channels, score your channels based on you, not your
Mhm.
company. And this is how we get better. Somebody
So
else had a really good one. Assad, hey buddy.
so it's actually funny. This transitions us, I think, into the final topic we needed to hit on today, which I derailed us from earlier, um, which is multi-threading. When you're selling into an account with multiple stakeholders, like how are you layering all of these channels together? And actually, Nick, you've posed the most interesting challenge I've ever heard for social selling, which is, and this is such a good creative question because, and you post about this the other day, creativity is about constraints. So I
Oh,
love creative challenges, right? How can I, for example, how can I get to a point where I would pay for every meeting for the person I'm calling? That's a great creative challenge. Like, what is required for me to get to that point? Um, Another creative challenge, which is what you've been posing recently. How can I get the person that I'm targeting to call me in 90 days or less?
it's my favorite one.
And it works so well when you start thinking about multi-threading a deal because when you have, I want to skip over some of the basics here. Let's assume people say, okay, we've mapped out our buying personas. We understand there's a committee. We know there's multiple different stakeholders involved. Now, how do we layer all of these things together? The most crucial thing in my mind is basically everybody's on the same page. Every that there's this fluidity of 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 motion between stuff, right? Everything just cascades naturally through the deal cycle. So how do you get to that point? And most importantly, if there is a champion you're going after and you're just trying to route into the account, what is required for them to call you in 90 days or less?
This is where my question, I say they've already bought the suit. Now they just
Mhm.
need the tailoring.
Mhm.
What are the 5 to 10 things they need to know and really understand for them to buy the suit? And then this is where the complexity comes in. Like, they need help with implementation. They need help to roll it out and make sure they actually see the value in it. But who would need to know you exist, and what would they need to know about you? So Wasim had said, what do you think about webinars? Are they still good for prospecting strategy? So think about this. If I had 20 target accounts and my goal was to get all 20 of those target accounts in these weekly shows, but not the VPs. My goal was to understand what's going through those VPs' heads and the directors, management and leadership's heads, to really understand where the disconnect is and where the problem is showing up. And I empowered SDRs and AEs to kick ass and gave them a resource to go and get their promotions, to go and help them. Or when things were going wrong, I gave them a resource to go and share amongst the group. What do you think would happen if you were a manager or a director and you kept getting the B2B Power Hour sent to you? I can tell you what happens.
I mean, we can
They
tell you what
message
happened.
us.
Yeah. And
And
that's why,
it
yeah.
usually takes time. And this is the thing that
Mhm.
you have to go and really keep in mind is warm up can create inbound.
Mhm.
It takes time. And so what did they I think there was somebody else that said it takes 2 to 3 times pipeline.
Something like that is a rule of
So
thumb.
what I've noticed is it's somewhere between 60 and 120 days for us that they are watching and consuming, and then they'll come to us and ask us questions.
Mhm.
But this is where we flip and we had the intent. But multi-threading in this case is a little different because I want to touch on all the different levels with social. Where once the meeting starts, what I want to do is think of yourself like a project manager. This is the new hat we have to wear when we've sold the champion, but we can pre-sell the champion too. Just keep this in mind when we're prospecting, we can pre-sell the champion and start this process sooner. It's an art. It's really easy to screw up. I've done it too many times. But that's a different thing. Is you want to go and loop them in when necessary and at the right time. So now as project management, who normally gets involved in this process? Think about it too. Where does the process usually get derailed or slowed down? I could tell you back in investment banking, it was contracting,
Always.
legal,
Mm,
always hammered
always
us,
legal. Yep.
and their accountant.
Mhm.
Either getting the information or or them just trying not to go and, swing around their ego like they were the big man in the room.
Mhm.
But it was just something that happened all the time. So we knew that if we looped them in early at the right time, they would be champions and they wouldn't get in the way, or they'd have no sway to get in the way.
Well, and I think let's tie in the concept earlier where when you're using social, and let's take the case in which they are active on social for a second, and we can talk about if they're not. Um, Now you have leverage on a platform like LinkedIn or Twitter or Reddit or whatever to comment and to engage with their entire team. You have direct
Mhm.
access to every stakeholder. Like that's the promise of LinkedIn. It's the best and biggest networking platform you've ever been a part of. The issue is if you're multi-threading a deal, the sort of standard connect and pitch advice is bad anyways, but it is even worse here because you're not actually trying to sell the fourth stakeholder on a buying committee of your software. You are just trying to build that relationship. And I think, is it Alex Boyd who talks about slowing down to sell more? But basically, the principle here is that you're trying not to convince every person on the buying committee or challenger customer even talks about this. The more that you personalize the information, the messaging of your product to each persona on the buying committee, the less likely the deal is to close, which sounds counterintuitive. But it is because each person is so caught up in their own day to day. They have to make the decision. Come on, no, you
Where
need a yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Go
I
for
can't
it.
remember. You call it something different in the US. You're gonna have to go and help me.
Oh no.
Have you ever got hit? But think of back in the school days
Uh
where you
huh.
had to go and write a book report
Yeah. Yeah.
and you
Oh.
got like nailed, like, and you forgot about it, and you're like, "Oh shoot, I can't read this book in the next hour."
Yeah.
So you get the Coles notes, or what do you guys call it?
Spark notes or Cliff's
Spark
notes.
notes,
Yeah. Uh
the
huh.
cliff notes.
Yep.
A lot of sellers, when they're multi-threading, try to like it's almost like verbal diarrhea. Give them
Yeah.
this garbage, and so all these people are trying to sift through to find information that's useful.
hmm
What are the Coles notes? What are
hmm
the Spark notes?
hmm
What are the 3 things, just a few things that they need to either report on or to know that this is actually valuable and that you get what's going through their mind
hmm
and their workflow?
And this is where like social provides such an opportunity not to engage in the sense of, oh, you're a target account. I need to sell you on my vision. It's, oh, you're active here. I'm just going to engage. And so when my name comes across in your email inbox because we're trying to close this deal, you're like, oh, I've heard of them. That's Nick at B2B Power Hour. Yeah, I've seen this stuff before. Because again, as you say, and many others, you can only move at the speed of trust. But deals close because you're somebody they know, like, and trust. And marketing can take care of a lot of the knowing and the liking, but sometimes when they do their job well. But in the B2B world, I think a lot of the trusting comes out in sales. And so social provides us an opportunity to start building trust at scale before they are ever a prospect in our pipeline, before they are ever in a funnel, before they have ever reached any part of our traditional sales process. And the way we do that are the fundamentals. We're commenting, we're connecting, we're having conversations.
And so while you're prospecting, the question to ask yourself is, who are the 3 to 5 people that need to know I exist? And then it goes back to my other question of, how do I get them to book a meeting with me in the next 90 days or less? When you start out with who are the 3 to 5 people I need to know I exist, this is how you start to go and earn trust at scale within an account. You warm it up, and this is how deals move fast because they know who you are. You've educated them on the problem. They know that they understand why they need to change. They understand the time is now, and they really understand why you.
And this is also why identifying your superpower is so important, because there might be an SDR on your team or an AE on your team whose superpower is social, and they just have a knack for being able to put stuff into content and share out that content, and their buyers love it. And that may not be you. That's fine. Maybe you're really good on the phone. So let's prioritize phone now, because now you can get on the phone, do the same thing that the AE is doing in their content, but over the phone. And all you're trying to do is get to that point where we've harmonized all of the activity metrics, the targeting, and the channels together for each of the personas that you're trying to reach. And yes, in some ways, social is more effective or serves a purpose to warm up accounts before you call, before you email. But that doesn't mean you have to go all in on social to use it. You do not have to be the rock star of the social world. You don't, and actually we've proven this out. You need 500 connections basically to start like getting any attention. Like you need that baseline where LinkedIn says yes, they've been active on the network, but you don't need 20,000 followers to start generating deals. If your superpower is social, for example, or if you're on email, maybe now you're thinking about, how can I complement the stuff that I'm sending out in email in my sequences, but leverage it in a way that becomes my comments or my content. And that doesn't mean you have to, invest hours in social every week. It could be 20 minutes.
Well, go talk to marketing and ask them why they put the problem statements on the website in the order
Hmm.
that they did.
Hmm.
Perfect. Now there's your email sequence. Do your 3 emails with the different problem statements. And then if they don't pick, at the end, fourth one, and put it in their hands. You call it a
Yep.
breakup, whatever you want. I'd argue it's hard to break up with something that never existed, but
Yeah. That's for another day. Well, yeah, I mean, as anybody has any questions as we're closing out the hour, make sure to drop them in chat and we'll get to them. The the last thing that's on my mind, Nick, is that layering these channels together is, I always felt this. I don't know if you felt this, and I know a lot of salespeople have felt this too. It feels like it's kind of risky. Like, what if it fails? And Kyle Williams told me once on his episode, actually, he's like, "We're not doing pharmaceuticals. Like, there's the downside to this is you don't get a reply. You're not killing anybody. There's no rockets exploding. There's no, there's nothing like going crazy wrong in the world because you messed up an email sequence." So I think the more that we can lean into taking that risk, to trying something new, to figuring out what our numbers are on each of these channels, the better off we'll be. Not because somehow we hit quota better, but or faster. I mean, that will happen, and as you get better and better. But it's so that you understand your own natural strengths and can use them effectively.
I will tell you, if you are a good cold caller,
Mm,
you will kick ass on social
hmm.
because you understand how to have a conversation and get attention. And
Yep.
if you want to see how that turns in, go follow Jacob.
Yeah. Hey, Jacob. Uh, um, So next week we are hosting a live show on Tuesday about social selling with Evan Patterson. You can find that event on Nick's profile. Check it out. It's going to be a banger. Evan's got a ton of experience on content, especially, and social listening,
And
figuring out what people are saying.
he was a BDR
And he was a
that was
BDR.
that was booking 40 plus meetings. His team actually told him to slow down because they couldn't keep up with the meetings that he was booking because
What a
he was
problem.
so dialed in with his social listening and how he was, getting out there with the comments and getting people at the right time that it just boom, 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 boom. It worked for him.
That's
He found his
amazing.
superpower.
Yes. So check that out. It's on Tuesday, and it's available over Nick's profile. So thank you, everyone who's joined us today. It's our normal Friday live show. And Nick, any closing thoughts?
If you don't already, come follow us,
Mhm.
connect with us. We'd love to get connected with you. Would love to hear all your questions. And I just want to say thank you. We really appreciate you joining us. We love to do this for you. We learn so much from doing this with you guys. And we'd love to hear how you're kicking ass. So please shoot us DMs how you're putting this to work. And let's celebrate the wins together.
Sounds
Thanks,
good.
everyone.
Thanks. Happy Friday.
Take care. Bye.